But within Goldman Sachs, there was some concern about its savior. Former Chairman John Whitehead was once Sidney Weinberg's assistant.
He was getting older, and I recognized that nearly 100% of the business that Goldman Sachs did was his business, where he had the contacts with the company. And what would happen to Goldman Sachs after that?
Whitehead, not even a partner at the time, proposed the unheard of, a unit that would actually go out and solicit new business.
Calling on companies was not something that was done in investment banking circles. The companies came to see your firm.
The new idea was a success. Goldman added scores of clients and established a new industry standard.
Sidney was able to retire graciously, and we didn't lose a single one of his clients.
Now, did he ever come to you and say, you know what, Whitehead, that was a good idea?
Never did. Never did.
When Weinberg died in 1969, he was succeeded as senior partner by Gus Levy, who gained a reputation as the hardest working man on Wall Street. He soon had all of Goldman Sachs working just as hard.
I retired because I really wanted to manage money. And
hedge fund pioneer Leon Cooperman started his career at Goldman working for Levy.
Yes, the guy was a shaker, maker, a doer. Gus Levy was in there 7 o'clock in the morning with 2 secretaries working with him around the clock. His life was the business.
But business wasn't everything. Levy helped build a tradition of charity that continues to this day, pushing Goldman employees toward philanthropic work. His philosophy became the firm's.
Gus Levy always said he wants to be long-term and greedy, not short-term and greedy. Do the right thing by a client, and everything will work out. And I think that was the culture of the firm.
Takeover mania in America. Huge corporations.
The early 1980s brought a surge in hostile takeovers. For most investment banks, this was a lucrative new market, too good to pass up. But John Whitehead, a successor to Gus Levy, saw it differently.
And it was our observation that the company that had been raided was angry at the company that raided them because the old management all quit and went somewhere else. And it looked to us like unfriendly raids simply didn't work. We decided that Goldman Sachs would not represent acquiring companies that made unfriendly raids.
From then on, Goldman was known as Wall Street's White Knight, the go-to good guys who defended corporate America. Its new stature brought new clients, new hires, and the beginning of Goldman's notoriously exhaustive interview process.
In all of these interviews, they get to know the firm.
Edith Cooper is Goldman's global head of human resources.
10, 12, 15 interviews.
Interviews.
Is that typical?
Yeah. It is. If you have people go through an interviewing process, interviewing being done by different personalities, different perspectives, you increase the probability of getting it right.
Once Goldman gets it right, each new hire is required to read a document written in the 70s by John Whitehead.
I wondered how all these new people that we were hiring, how they could be indoctrinated with the principles of Goldman Sachs, the conduct that we expected from our people. So on a Sunday afternoon and with a yellow pad, I wrote down what turned out to be these principles.
The 14 principles would become a roadmap for the company's unmatched success and the success of its employees. When we return, payday at Goldman Sachs.
Bob Rubin had a great line that he said to our training classes, your goal is not to get fired. That if you can just figure out a way to stay in your seat and do a good job, well, lo and behold, you're going to be rich.
That's next when Goldman Sachs' Power and Peril continues. The culture of Wall Street has always been a source of popular fascination, in part due to its stratospheric pay, a subject of both envy and revulsion. At Goldman Sachs, CEO Lloyd Blankfein took home more than $67 million in total compensation in 2007. In 2009, a year after receiving a $10 billion taxpayer bailout, Goldman paid out a staggering $16 billion to its workforce, almost $500,000 on average for each of its 32,000 employees. Anthony Scaramucci, a Goldman vice president during the 90s, remembers the advice of then CEO Robert Rubin.
Bob Rubin had a great line that he said to our training classes, your goal is not to get fired. This is such a great firm that if you can just figure out a way to stay in your seat and do a good job, well, lo and behold, you're going to be rich.
By the time Scaramucci left the firm, he was pulling down $1.5 million a year. But the money didn't come easily. There were relentless hours and high expectations. Now a CNBC contributor and running his own asset management firm, Scaramucci remembers the lengths the bank went to instill the Goldman work ethic.
We arrive at the meeting at 5 p.m. It's the Friday before the Memorial Day 3-day weekend. And guess what? We are sitting there waiting. A couple guys left. Okay, when the guy showed up at 10 o'clock, 5 hours late, he passed around an attendance sheet. And he said, the lesson today is about waiting for people that are more important than you. And he said, someday there'll be a billionaire you need to get to. He's going to make you wait in his lobby. Okay, you need to be conditioned for that. And then he got up and he left.
And what happened to those new hires who left early? Scaramucci says they were promptly fired. Stories like that only reinforced Goldman's mystique as a tightly knit culture of extraordinarily driven professionals with a guarded approach to outsiders.
Day one training, going back to day one, don't talk to the press. That was the number one thing they said to people.
A reluctance to open up is still a cornerstone of the Goldman culture, as we discovered in our own dealings with the firm.
Goldman Sachs officials agreed to cooperate with us for this report. But the access we were given to the firm turned out to be very limited. Interviews with rank-and-file employees were off limits, as were most locations inside their building. We weren't allowed to bring our cameras to the firm's trading floor or any public spaces. We weren't even allowed to show you the lobby.
We did reach out to dozens of former Goldman employees. Most wouldn't talk to us, and the few who agreed to did so only after first checking with headquarters. Striking evidence of an enduring loyalty built upon Goldman's emphasis on teamwork.
Very famous line at Goldman, here's the difference between us and the other firms. We've got 6 guns, we're all cowboys. We're going to point our guns outside, we're going to shoot outside. Inside these other firms, they got 1 gun pointed on each other. What made us different was our ability to get along with each other and act collegial.
That collegiality stems from a time when Goldman was a tightly knit group of partners whose money and efforts were pooled for their common profit. By the late 1990s, every other major investment bank had chosen to raise billions through a public offering of stock. In 1999, to stay in the game, Goldman followed suit.
A big debut expected tomorrow for the Goldman Sachs initial public offering.
It was a time of extraordinary change for the bank and its culture. Like the rest of Wall Street, Goldman was also moving away from classic investment banking, financing mergers and advising clients, towards trading, both for clients and for itself, in everything from oil to subprime mortgages. Financial